Bueno chicos, pues vamos a dar pie a la tercera charla, ¿vale? Es momento de hablar de una herramienta que seguro que todos y todas conocéis. Pregunta rápida. ¿Quién de vosotros ya ha construido algo con Firebase? Vale, bueno, bien, genial. Prepárense porque Firebase ya no es solo NoSQL, sino que han introducido Firebase DataConnect. Nuestra siguiente speaker, Daria, ella va a compartir con todos vosotros su experiencia directa detallando las ventajas y los puntos difíciles de DataConnect. Al final de esta charla esperamos que todos vosotros comprendáis claramente en qué casos DataConnect es la elección correcta para vuestro proyecto. Por favor, un fuerte aplauso para Daria.
Hola. Okay. Hola. Me llamo Daria y hablo un poco de español, pero normalmente después de una copa de vino. Y como ahora son solo las 10 de la mañana, hasta este momento he tomado solo un cafecito, entonces seguimos en inglés. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about my adventure to Firebase, specifically with DataConnect, a new SQL solution by Firebase. But before we do that, put your hands up if you pronounce the 3 letters as SQL. Okay, put your hands up if you pronounce it SQL. Okay, put your hands up if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, a couple of people. But yeah, I used to pronounce it as SQL, but then I heard my boss saying SQL all of the time, and I thought that this was like very smart, and also saves me like 3 nanoseconds every time I say SQL instead of SQL. So yeah, now I say SQL. A couple of things to know about me is that I'm an active community member. I'm a Google developer expert in Flutter and Dart. I'm also part of Flutteristas, which is not a Spanish name for people doing Flutter, but it's actually a community of female and non-binary developers interested in Flutter. So if that's about you and you're not part of the community, let me know, we can talk about that. I'm also a Women Tech Makers Ambassador and an event organizer about Flutter, obviously. I'm from Riga, Latvia. In Spanish, it's Lithuania, maybe you know better. It's a small country in northern part of Europe, and I organize Flutter Riga meetups there, and also co-organizer of Flutter and Friends, which sometimes shows up on this little thing, together with Lucas over there, who's going to give a talk later on today about Flame. I'm also author of Flutter Design Patterns and Best Practices book, so if you're starting out with Flutter, it's also a good resource to check out. And together with my husband, I'm a co-founder of BBapps, a small indie app studio where we create apps that care for you and the planet. And one thing that a lot of people learn, like one of the first things they learn about me is that I'm a bit obsessed with cats, just a little bit. And to make you more focused during this talk, because we are going to talk about a lot of boring technical things, I have hidden some cat images inside my presentation, and the first person to tell me how many cats there are at the end of my presentation will get a nice Latvian treat, okay? So keep your eyes focused. Okay, so the agenda for today is we're going to discuss Bunny Search, an app that uses DataConnect, my app. What is DataConnect? DataConnect in action. Also, we will take a look at some edge cases that DataConnect doesn't cover or covers. Okay, we will take a look and try to answer the question whether should you use DataConnect or not. Can you hear me or am I screaming? Because I really don't understand if I'm speaking correctly into the microphone. Super close. Is this better? Okay, great. Okay, now let's talk about BBapps. Currently we have 3 active applications. One of them is language learning, where I'm trying to learn Spanish, not super successfully as you have heard. It's called Native Pal, but basically you can practice speaking with AI characters. Next one is Trigger Journal, which is also AI-based symptom tracker and wellness journal, and where you can track all kinds of conditions, both mental and physical, and find patterns and maybe find solutions to fix those conditions. And also Bunny Search, which is an app where you can check whether a cosmetics brand is cruelty-free or not. So what is cruelty-free? Cruelty-free is a term used to describe cosmetics brands that don't perform animal testing. Animal testing is just one of the ways to test for like safety and how the cosmetics brand works. But it is a very cruel method of testing. And there are many other methods that don't involve any animals suffering to check whether the cosmetics brand is safe or not. You might think, okay, cosmetics brands, this doesn't, I don't really care about that, right? It doesn't apply to me. But let's do a little show of hands. Put your hands up if you regularly or occasionally use makeup in your life, like lipsticks, mascaras, eyeshadows. Come on, don't be shy. It's okay. Glitter also. Okay, we have a couple of people. What about face cream and face wash? Okay, a little bit more. Now, what about toothpaste, shampoo, shower gels, deodorant? I mean, I really hope I will see all of the hands up. Okay. Okay. I mean, the room smells nice, so I guess everyone does use those things. And the thing is, if you use any of these cosmetics, they're all called cosmetics, but also washing powders, or you have pets and you wash your pets with something. All of these are cosmetics, and all of them are subject to animal testing. So next time when you're shopping for some of that, you can use Bunny Search to check whether the product that you're buying is cruelty-free or not, and make this world a little bit of a better place. Okay, so and how do you define whether the product is cruelty-free or not? Basically, there are many organizations, and the most popular of them are PETA and Leaping Bunny. And if you take a look, their logotypes have bunnies on them. And this is where the name comes from. And this is our little bunny of the Bunny Search. So we're searching for the bunny. And that's why the topic and the theme of today's presentation is we are following the white rabbit. Okay, so step one, how does Bunny Search work? First of all, you search for a brand name, either by putting it as a text or taking a photo of the product. And next, if this brand is in our database, you can see the information about this brand, if it's cruelty-free, what organizations it is certified by, and so on. And the data model behind this application consists of two main entities. First entity is the brand, and we can have many brands, and each brand has some metadata about it. And we can have many collections, also known as organizations, which also have some metadata about them. And the thing is, each collection has many brands, and each brand can be part of many collections. So this way, we define that we have a many-to-many relationship between the brand and collection. And when we have relationships, especially many-to-many relationships between our entities, a relational database is a better solution. Technically, you could manage all of this data with a NoSQL database, but it would be much harder and probably more problematic. So relational database is what we were looking for. And I have seen that not a lot of people use Firebase here, right? So can we do another show of hands again? If you have used Firebase. Okay, do you know or at least heard about what Firebase is? Put your hand up. Okay, a bit more people. So Firebase basically is a solution which is known as backend as a service, and it provides all kinds of services that you would use or you would create a custom backend for, like databases, remote function calls, and so on. And instead of you spinning up your own custom backend and learning backend, you can use Firebase and its SDKs to have solutions to your problems. And databases is one of the most popular problems. So, DataConnect. DataConnect is one of the newest Firebase services. It was introduced last year at Google I/O, and before DataConnect, Firebase only offered NoSQL databases, Firestore, and real-time database. So if you wanted a SQL database, then you would have to look elsewhere or have your own custom backend. But now DataConnect is an option. So DataConnect is a whole product that consists out of several parts. The first part is your actual database, PostgreSQL database, which is managed on Cloud SQL. Second part is obviously your client application, Flutter or Android or iOS or web. And then a schema defined with GraphQL, which Firebase DataConnect uses to generate bindings both to access your PostgreSQL database and also to be called from your client application. I know you're tired and I know you're shy of putting your hands up, but put your hand, because I just want to understand on which level we are together here, if you have experience with GraphQL. Okay, some people. If you have heard about GraphQL. Okay, some more. So basically, GraphQL is a query language, and it is used to define schemas that allow your application to access your APIs. And those APIs can be different remote data sources, but in our case, it is PostgreSQL database. And even if you have never seen GraphQL, it will be quite simple to understand, and we will see examples soon enough. Okay, so step 0, the setup. First thing that you need to know about DataConnect is that it's not available on the Firebase free plan. So there is a huge Firebase free plan which you can use many services for, but DataConnect, you have to enable Blaze plan and you pay as you go. You pay for network egress, operation count, and the actual instance handling, depending on how you set it up. And then you enable it in your Firebase console. If this is your first time seeing how Firebase console looks like, well, basically, that's an example. On the left, you have different services, authentication, Firestore database, Crashlytics storage, many things. And then you can manage each service separately. And then you can either define your schema, define your entities custom, like by hand, manually writing, or because we're living in 2025, you can ask Gemini to do that for you and do this via the schema generator powered by Gemini. So for example, we can describe in human language that we want an app that checks if a brand is cruelty-free by belonging to one of the organizations. So let's see what Gemini generates. And this is what Gemini generates. We have entity, brand, organization, and brand organization, which is pretty close to what we're actually going for, because in general, bunny search use case is actually very simple. And if you don't like it, you can also, if you are missing something or something that you don't need, you can refine it further by chatting with Gemini. Or of course, you can also write it by hand. Then you finish the setup. You can either create a new Cloud SQL instance if you don't have one, or if you already have one, you can also connect it, but only if it's using a PostgreSQL database. And then you will also need to install some tooling. But basically, if you run the CLI command, it will install everything for you, and there is a bunch of things to install. And when you're done, this is how your project will look like, and this is just for you to see it for the first time, and we will zoom in into most of the files one by one. Okay, so step 1, let's return back to our schema. And this is how the schema for bunny search looked like. Very familiar to what we have already seen. We have a brand, we have a collection, and we have a collection brand. Okay, so each of them has some information like names, websites, and so on. And the collection brand also has relationships with the brand and with the collection, because it only makes sense in relation to the brand in the collection, right? It's a particular brand that belongs to a specific collection, not outside of it. Because in theory, we can also have brands that don't belong to any collections. They're not cruelty-free. They're not certified by anyone. So yeah. And this is how your schema will look like. And let's zoom in a little bit into the first object, the brand. So this is how it looks like. I think if you have seen code, like object-oriented code in general before, this looks somewhat familiar. We can understand that there is a type called brand, and it has fields like ID, name, and they have types like strings. But what's interesting here is the annotations that we use here: table, unique, and default. And in GraphQL, these are called directives, and directives are like special keywords that you can use to define behavior, to define your database setup, to define your data handling, security, and so on. So in this case, we have table, which gives us a SQL alternative name brands and not just brand. It says that the name must be unique, and it also gives some default values to create it at and update it at fields. Directives available in DataConnect are table, column, unique, default, index, ref, view, and you can do all kinds of things that you would do with the SQL database here, and you can also use expressions. For example, you have access to Firebase authentication object, and you can do all kinds of authorizations with this object. And also, you can have access to request, which has parameters such as time and anything else that you can put into this request in your code. And under the hood, like you don't write this SQL, but under the hood, this is what DataConnect generates for creating, for example, for a table of brands in SQL. Okay, another interesting object or type will be the collection brand that I have already mentioned earlier. And it is interesting because we specify that its primary key will be a compound key based on the collection primary key and the brand primary key. We can also see it here in our schema user interface, not user interface, but the graphical representation of it. And another important thing is that we define connections on the collection table and on the brand table. And this means that we will have access to join tables when we perform queries later on, which we will take a look at further. And the syntax is we have access to this syntax, for example, collection brands on collection and collection brands on brand, and do all kind of complex queries with that. Okay, and this is where your schema lives. It lives under the schema folder in schema GQL file, and that's where you describe it. Okay, step 2, we are satisfied with our schema and we want to actually do something with this data. So most of the operations that you are going to be doing with data can be described as CRUD, create, read, update, delete, but we can also distill them down further into read and write operations. And in GraphQL terminology, these are called queries for reading and mutations for writing. And you can describe them also under the connector folder in mutation, GraphQL, and queries, GraphQL files. You can also name them differently. So yeah, let's take a look at, I have a time show that we need to hurry up. But yeah, is that so? Okay, so yeah, about queries. Let's take a look at how we can write a query. So we use a query keyword, and we want to write a query that gets collection by ID. And let's zoom in. We pass the parameter collection ID string, and we see this interesting line that says out, but we will take a look later on. The next line is we query the collection table by passing the collection ID string. But before returning this to the user, we want to make sure that, first of all, this collection exists. So we check this is not null and this is not deleted. We have access to special keyword this. Then we check the user authorization. So we make sure that either this collection is public or the user trying to request this collection is the owner of this collection. And if any of these are not true, we return an error with the message collection not found. Okay, then we describe the fields that we want from this collection. And the next interesting field is brand count. Because for brand count, we need to do some more actions here. And what we do here is, first of all, we query this table that we have seen earlier, collection brands on collection. So we want to find all of the collection brands that belong to this particular collection, what I showed you earlier. And as I said, this is a syntax to query relations, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, on and via. You can check all of this in the documentation. And yeah, we can do all kind of filtering. I'll try to do it a little bit faster so that we're on board with the time. You can do all kind of filtering. You can also do all kind of aggregation with count and so on. And now let's take a look at mutations. I will also share the slides later on, so if you want to go through this again, feel free to do that. Yeah, mutation is when we want to write some data, not only read some data. So let's say we want to add a branch to a collection. We use a keyword mutation here. And we can also do transactions, as in a regular SQL database, which are atomic. So first of all, we check that the collection and the brand exist before we do something to them. And then when we are verified that they do exist, we can upsert to the collection brand the data, collection ID, brand ID, and the data. And the similar way we can do inserts, deletes, and also do batch updates with the many syntax. Okay, let's return to the authentication that we have talked before over here. So Firebase DataConnect allows you to connect with Firebase authentication, which is also a very powerful service to authenticate your users. And you need to control every query and every mutation with authentication. Yes, this is the authentication part. And we will discuss levels in just a second. But there are secure levels and insecure levels. And if it's insecure, then you also need to specify a reason why you're making it insecure. As in this case, it's a publicly available collection. Okay, that was the authentication part, but authorization part is on us as on developers. And in our case, the authorization for this query consists of checking whether the owner of this collection is the actual user trying to query this collection. And Firebase authentication has different levels of authentication: public, anonymous users, non-anonymous users, users with email verified, and also no access, which is the default. So if you skip this out directive, the default access will be no access, and the queries will fail. So make sure that you grant correct access levels. And we can also use expressions, as I said, with this out object when we want to check some specific things, like, for example, token plan, if it's a premium user, and so on. Okay, and now we are ready to connect our client application to the database, to query the database from our app. And this is done in the, for now we need to check the connector YAML file, which is underneath the connector folder. And this is where we describe where to generate our SDKs for the client. As I said, you can use this, you can generate iOS, Android web, and also Flutter, because we're Flutter developers. And for Flutter, we specify the ID of the connector and the location in our project where we want the SDKs to be generated. Okay, and in order to be able to use DataConnect in our client application, we obviously need to have Firebase set up in general. So if you have done that before, good for you. If not, then you have a whole new world to discover. But Firebase DataConnect is another dependency that you will need to add. And then the bindings are generated automatically if you use Firebase extension, or you can also generate them via CLI by calling this command. I'm sorry that I'm rushing a little bit, it's just that we're short on time and I'm trying to fit in as much information as I can, so yeah. And yeah, we have, as a result, we have a core SDK provided by DataConnect plugin, and also the generate SDK, which is conforming to the schema that we have defined earlier via GraphQL. And this is an example of how it looks. We have all of the methods that we have defined, queries, mutations, and then when we look even deeper into one of the methods, we have all of the code here that ensures that we have type-safe methods, and we know all of the parameters up front that we get and that are requested and so on. And this is very nice that we don't need to write any client code, parsing and so on. We can just actually call the methods that already exist in our database. Important thing is that DataConnect queries and mutations are not submitted by client code and executed on the server. They're like cloud functions. So if you have any breaking changes and you deploy them, you might break existing clients. So be very mindful about that. Okay, testing, deploying, and migrating. So we'll go very fast through this. Basically, of course, we don't want to test in production, and in order to test on development side, we can use Firebase emulators. So Firebase emulators is like a suite of different emulators which you can test things locally with. And when you launch an emulator, so if you're using VS Code and Firebase extension, just by pressing the button Start Emulators, you can see in your CLI that they're running. And then in your Flutter code, instead of connecting to the production database of Firebase, you need to specify the local host and ports to which to connect to make sure that you're connecting to the development database. Deploying, very easy, Firebase deploy. You just press this, type this command in the CLI, and everything is deployed. Or just press the button. But the problem is that if you have any other deployable, if you use any other deployable Firebase services, this will deploy everything. So to make sure that you're only deploying DataConnect, use the specific flags related to DataConnect. Migrating. This is the migration logic is described in dataconnect.yaml file, which is stored over here. And basically, we have already looked at all of the files that are interesting for us. And there are two types of schema validation modes. One is compatible and one is strict. Strict means that your database schema must exactly match the application schema, and everything that doesn't match, anything custom tables, custom indices, or if it's a migration that can't be performed without destruction, it will be all gone. It will be all pruned, so be very careful with that. Compatible means that, of course, the schema still must be compatible, but you can, everything else is optional, and you have custom things, and also you will need to perform manual migrations. And in production, we obviously use only compatible, because otherwise we risk losing data, or also messing up our schema if we're doing anything custom. Yeah, and you can also check what kind of migration will need to be performed with these DataConnect CLI command. And if it's not compatible, then we will need to perform manual migration. And yeah, for that, we should definitely commit our code to GitHub, if you want to do rollback so that we always have version control, first migrate the clients and then migrate the server. Avoid breaking changes if possible, and also if you very must do that, then use manual versioning and have different methods like getlist v2 and getlist v1 for different for backwards compatibility. You can also monitor your health and your usage in Firebase Console and Google Cloud Console. And very fast, a couple of cases that are beyond the basic DataConnect capabilities is one of them is fuzzy search. So basically, in any application, when you search for something in Spotify, for example, if you try to search a song and you make a typo or you don't write an accented letter, it will still find the song that you're looking for, right? And this is called approximate string matching, or also known as fuzzy search. And we also wanted to support that in Bunny Search. And I have written an article how to do that in pure Dart, but we're talking about SQL right now. And for that, for this algorithm, because it's a whole algorithm, we use a PostgreSQL extension called Trigram. And basically, it's an algorithm that helps you find or define similarity between the strings. You can read more about it on the internet, obviously, because it's a whole interesting topic. But in a nutshell, what it does is that this extension provides us with special function similarity and also a score that is returned. But the thing is, to use this, we need to write custom SQL, and because DataConnect doesn't support like custom raw SQL, we need to deploy this code somewhere else. And for that, we use Firebase Cloud Functions. So if you wanted to use Firebase DataConnect to completely avoid using Cloud Functions, well, if your use cases go beyond something very simple, something very crude, then you will still need to use Cloud Functions. And another case is unstructured data. So for each organization, we have different parameters. So for example, besides being cruelty-free, it can also be vegan, it can also be eco-friendly, it can also be nature-friendly, and so on. Well, organic, I remember the word organic. So each organization provides different types of information. And because this information is unstructured and arbitrary for every type of collection, we store this as data, as an object. So it's basically just a JSON blob. But DataConnect doesn't support JSON blobs. And if you want to filter by JSON blob fields, we would also need to write custom SQL for that. So for example, we want to see a collection of vegan brands. And we could do that with a view directive. And here we can write some custom SQL. And for example, in this case, we can query the JSON blob field is vegan, but it's only in a raw SQL. And Firebase DataConnect doesn't validate this SQL, so you must test it yourself, because if it does something weird or doesn't return correct data or something, you will have errors. So make sure you test this thoroughly. Yeah. Also, DataConnect supports full text search with a lot of capabilities, and also vector search with vector embeddings with the help of Vertex AI. And a couple of missing features is that no real-time query updates. You can't subscribe to updates. You need to query them manually. You can't write cloud functions that are triggered when something is written to the DataConnect, to the PostgreSQL database, and also no offline support. So, final questions. Is Firebase DataConnect for you? Well, to answer this question, you need to answer the following questions. Do you have an existing database and infrastructure? Because if yes, then why would you need to migrate that? Is your application simple, crude application? Do you plan to use custom extensions or write a lot of custom SQL code? Cloud functions, do you want to write them, or do you write them? Are you okay with writing them, and so on? And are you okay with learning new technologies such as GraphQL and in general DataConnect? For us, we had some issues with DataConnect, like especially because it was an early product. Indexes were being dropped, extensions not supported, but we found workarounds, and also it's being fixed. And also, I think it's important as a community to support early products, to give feedback, because this way, that's the only way how those products can become mature. So if you have a use case that is not super important, like a client application, but you have your own pet project, I do think that you should try Firebase DataConnect. Whew, sorry, I feel like Eminem right now because I was trying to go so fast through my presentation, because we have break now, you can have a coffee and so on, and you can also, I guess we can have Q&A afterwards, or yeah?
After coffee.
Yeah, after coffee, okay. But first, did anyone count? Okay, you were first. 6? Okay, thank you.